argument, I took the headphones, I slung them into the bedroom, and I hit her in the head, somewhere over her eye, and it did some damage because she had to go in to see about it. She had to go in and into the hospital. Again, you know, she had some supposedly a slight concussion.
Shoved her down to the floor, and I put my foot on her head, and I told her, I'm the boss in this family, and don't forget it.
About 1 out of every 3 women in the United States will experience domestic violence at some point in her lifetime.
The way in which we define domestic violence is actually a pattern of behavior in which a person uses to establish and maintain power and control over another individual through different means. So that might be physical, sexual, emotional, psychological, or economic forms of abuse.
I had a client who actually was brought from another country. She lived in an extended family of her partner, and all of her monies were taken. She had no personal monies, and food was withheld. So that's both economic and livelihood abuse.
When a partner becomes very controlling, try to cut off the relationships that you have with friends and family. You do it in a sort of, your parents don't like me, I don't want to be around them. Or, your friends are a bad influence on you, I don't think you should hang around with them. So that, slowly you cut off your relationships with the outside, your support structure. And then that puts you in a situation where you really have very little help possible to turn to when things become violent.
Actually, that's the domestic violence definition. It's a pattern of coercive behavior designed to exert power and control over your partner. The power and control wheel demonstrates the various forms power and control can take. One is using economic abuse. Coercion and threats is a second area. Any threat, the threat that if you report this, if you call the police, I'll have you deported. If you call the police, I'll take your children. If you call the police, I'll kill your pet.
We talk about 3 different kinds of abuse within domestic violence. The physical violence that most people think about, sexual violence, which is a very common part of it, and also emotional and verbal abuse.
This may be name-calling, it may be insulting. Another in the power and control wheel is using intimidation and minimizing, denying, blaming is a huge sign. Denying that the abuse even happened, blaming the woman that it was her fault. The man may threaten to hurt the child. The man may threaten to discipline the child and discipline the child harshly. The man, if it's an immigrant family, the man may threaten to send the children back to their family in another country. All of these things can happen before the actual physical violence occurs. We explain the cycle of violence to the women who come to our shelter. Most of the women recognize their own pattern.
We talk about warning signs. We talk about looking at some of those sort of verbal, emotional kinds of things that start happening early on in a relationship when a partner becomes very controlling.
The cycle of violence has 3 phases. The first phase is tension building, and the tension builds and builds and builds. The second phase is where you see physical violence. That's explosive in nature. It's usually the piece that people recognize as domestic violence, although there can be violence during the tension building phase as well. In that second phase, which is the acute phase, often the man recognizes or feels that he's gone too far. The victim may feel that it's gone too far, and that moves to the third phase, which is a calming phase. It's the contrite phase. It's the forgiveness and the promises that it will never, ever happen again.
But what we have seen is that it's a large problem in all communities. So regardless of race or ethnicity, language, immigration status, age, even sexual orientation, income, that so many factors that we think play into why a person experiences domestic violence. Actually, it's unfortunately something that's present in all communities, and there are very high rates in all communities.
In fact, domestic violence is very complex, and without some help, the likelihood of it repeating is very high. And I guess another piece about the cycles, it tends to escalate. It tends to get, each time you go around that cycle, those 3 pieces, it gets worse each time.
On average, a victim of domestic violence attempted to leave 7 times before they finally left for good.
What we hear normally on the media is this piece way at the end. We hear the dramatic cases where the woman is on fire, or the very dramatic cases. But in truth, this is a cycle that with proper attention could have been addressed way early on.